Hi, welcome to EDSC 520 Educational Assessment. I just finished teaching 562 for Summer 1. You're still probably working on Summer 1. So this week you have a lot of reading to do and your discussion boards, but that will be what the focus is for this week. So you'll be reading chapters 1, 2, and 3. And then you're also going to do an icebreaker, which is one of the discussion boards. That's mostly to make sure that you've connected with the course for this week. And then you're also going to do an overview reflection. So there are 2 discussion boards that are due this week. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1 goes over what is assessment and exactly what are the different types of assessments that are used in school counseling. So what the counselors need to know about assessment is pretty much in the American Counseling Association under the Code of Ethics. How often we use counseling assessments, and then the counselor's credibility. One of what makes us most credible for the type of assessment tools that we use is that we need to make sure that we are trained to use those particular assessment and that we know how to score it and explain it in detail what the scores mean to the client. Okay, so those are the important concepts that are taught in chapter 1. So the different types of assessments, they can be therapeutic to improve the perception of the client. It can assist with decision making. So those are other ways that we try to use our assessments to prescribe or to determine how we're going to work with our clients. Some things that we need to know is that we need to use valid counseling assessment tools. We need to be sure that they are socially and cultural factors are related into the assessments that we're using for our particular individuals or groups that or specific populations. And then the ethical strategies that we use for selecting, administering, interpreting the assessments, and evaluating the instruments that we are using. So some different types of assessment tools that were kind of covered in chapter 1, standard versus non-standardized, individual versus group, objective versus subjective, verbal versus nonverbal, speed versus power, and then cognitive versus affective tools. So the cognitive instruments, the intelligence tests, which we don't pretty much use for most school districts, achievement and aptitude tests. And so those are some of the tools and testings that we use. We also do personality instrument tests and projective techniques. Chapter 2 goes over the basic principles for assessments. So it's important to know the measurement scales, nominal, ordinal, interval, and the ratio. Norm referenced versus criterion referenced instruments. So those norm referenced instruments are those individual scores, and it's compared to performance or others who have taken the same instrument in a norm group. Some examples of that are the personality inventory testing, evaluating the norming group, the size, the sampling, and the representation. And then we have our criterion referenced instruments, and those are individual performance that are compared to the performance of others who have taken that same instrument. To criteria or standard. So that would be like a 3rd grade spelling test. And then how the standards are determined, common practice, professional organizations, empirically determined. We also needed to know about frequency of distribution for the scores on a counseling aptitude test. That is covered in chapter 2 as well. And then the norm distributions, the raw scores, the percentile scores, the standard scores, those are things that we need to be able to have common knowledge of. Chapter 3 goes over reliability. So the key term there is like, what is reliability? Is a systemic versus unsystemic error. Reliability only takes unsystemic error into account. And reliability often is based on consistency between two sets of scores. So it goes over in chapter 3 all the detailed information about reliability, such as the classic test theory, which is observable scores in a combination of a true score and error, and then correlation coefficients, which are statistical techniques that are used to examine consistency. And it talks about the positive and negative correlations, and these are things that help you to be able to assess or evaluate the scores and explain the scores to your client after administering a particular test. It talks about the types of reliability coefficients, such as test and retesting, correlations to performance on the first administration of a test versus the second administration of a test, and then coefficient stability. So in this chapter, you're really focusing on the reliability of different types of tests and understanding how to evaluate that as a school counselor. All right, so that's chapter 1 and 2 and 3, and this is week 1, and this is my video for helping you out with what's due this week. So let's just review that you just have your 2 discussion boards plus the 3 chapters that I just went over in regards to that. And you have your first discussion board, which is an icebreaker, and the second one is an overview reflection. All right, thank you.